Welcome to the CatholicPsych Show. No Monday mailbag for us. Sorry to disappoint you if you're waiting to hear back from your comments to us. We had a national crisis over the weekend. Former President Donald Trump was shot at and wounded, and we are going to be talking about it today. Dr. Greg, we had to swerve here and talk about something very important, a historical moment, a national historical moment. I think I'll lead with this morning's quote from Trump. A lot of people say it's the most iconic photo they've ever seen. They're right, and I didn't die. Usually you have to die to have an iconic picture. Right on brand. He's right on brand in his first statement. So much to talk about with this story. I mean, maybe we should probably just begin with, for those who, if you're hiding under a rock, right?
No, don't even bother saying that. Don't even try it.
Should we do a little bit of like, this is what happened? Hold on. Here's the quick synopsis of what happened over the weekend. If you missed it.
We're not okay.
We have to. You have to. Maybe
Why?
This is you. Some of this is YouTube, right? Someone might see this in 2 years from now and be like, "What were they talking about?" So, former President Donald Trump survived an assassination attempt. They were not calling it an assassination attempt for a while, but finally they came out and called it that. President Biden wouldn't call it that in the beginning. During a campaign rally on Saturday, the 20-year-old suspect was killed by a Secret Service sniper after a bullet pierced the upper part of Trump's right ear. The attack killed one rally attendee, sadly, 50-year-old Corey Comparatore, I think that's his name, and left two others critically injured. Very sad. Trump was roughly 6.5 minutes into his speech in Butler, Pennsylvania, where the gunman opened fire from a nearby warehouse rooftop. Immediately following the attack, Trump was covered by Secret Service agents before ushering off stage, raising his fist in the air, and he was screaming, "Fight, fight, fight," as he did so. There are some iconic images of him doing this. The American flag in the background. FBI has not identified a motive as of this point for the suspect, a man from nearby Bethel Park, 20-year-old. That's the first attempted assassination of a U.S. president since Ronald Reagan in 1981. So he was temporarily hospitalized, and then he will speak, confirmed he will speak at the Republican National Convention beginning today in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So he's back. So many different things to talk about with this, so many different angles. Where do you think is the best place to begin? I think we should talk about Trump himself. Let's talk about Trump.
Well, what do you mean talk about Trump? His personality, his resolve,
I think we got to talk about the sniper. I think we got to talk about the Secret Service. I think we have to talk about the response from the left. But just Trump. I mean, what is your reaction to seeing Trump's behavior after being shot?
I mean, look, I don't want this is not to be divisive, but I like, in all seriousness, without being inflammatory, I have always really liked Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. Like, I know he says some stupid things. He's done some stupid things. Like, maybe there's, evidence of, and again, it's like, who knows what's media, what's not. Like, there's evidence of misogyny, and then there's evidence of like really like generous charity and a generous, approach to people. And I'm always looking at it in terms of like how closely aligned with the ideal of humanity in terms of each person's unique individual circumstance is a person living.
Yeah.
And that's a big statement. Like, that takes a lot into consideration there. So I'm not saying everybody needs to be, well, everybody should be a saint, but I'm not saying I'm evaluating everybody like, how many hours are you spending in holy hours? But it's like, given each person's context, and a lot of people don't have the formation, the opportunities, and if we're really honest, like, our conversion in our faith life is also a grace. Yeah. And there's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
So given the fact that there's a spectrum of people receiving a certain amount of grace or not to have a particular deepening of a depth of conversion, of holiness, of living a saintly life, in that context, where is the thread of integrity, of humanity, of magnanimity, of like virtues? And what do we see actually happening in a person? And like I think people have to really come to grips with this. It's like why, this is the argument that's been said a lot more recently. It's like why would this guy be doing this? Like he has power, he has money, he has notoriety, he has a lot. And
Well,
I mean, even as he was already a president, like even that he had. So like on some level, when he's like, I could be on my yacht, I could be on a golf club at a golf course, like
mhm.
it's true. But I mean, in that photo, in this iconic image of him getting shot in the face, like, and he's like, without dropping a beat. I don't care. Like, you could tell me, we could talk about this. Like, how narcissistic can you be? Do you have to be? Is it even possible to be that you're facing down your actual literal moment in the moment death, and somehow your reaction is still just defenses? Or is it possible that this is actually who he is, actually what he's about?
I mean, that is the argument. The argument is it's all driven by ego, and his awareness of the moment was still about, hit his ego that he took as a result of not winning the election. He has everything in the world, but still desiring power and authority, and you know, so this was
The
just like,
argument's also that he staged it. Like, there's a lot of
yeah,
arguments that's like, okay, I don't care what the argument is. I'm talking about like between me and you now talking about this. Like,
well, my
what
reaction to,
level of narcissistic defenses would you have to have face down a bullet in the moment,
yeah, pretty heavy
and
narcissism.
that doesn't shatter like your defenses, and you get to the core
Yeah,
of like the next statement out of his mouth could have been, now I don't get to be president, or I almost couldn't be, it's like it wasn't about him.
yeah. Well, yeah, I think there's a lot here. I mean, it's so interesting how much people can interpret this in different ways. Unlike you, I have never liked President Trump.
But don't jump over this for a minute. I don't care what other people are interpreting. Like people are going to have the most ridiculous spun media cycle, like all this nonsense. Like according to
Right.
party lines, it's very clear. I'm saying for you,
Yeah, I'm going to tell you.
if you look at him not flinching, not dropping a beat, do you think that there's still any reasonable assessment that he is not operating out of true deep self and true deep love for our country, and that this is actually who he is? This is actually what you're looking at when you see Donald Trump.
I think I have parts of myself. I think, like I said, I haven't historically liked him. I haven't liked his personality. I've been really turned off. Or I thought he's funny. I can do the impression. I like. It's kind. I think he's funny. I laugh at him. But in terms of like actually respecting him, I have not. Now, when I saw him stand up after being shot and shaking his fist with blood on his face, and him saying "fight, fight, fight," that was the first time I felt something for this man in ever. That
Yeah, why?
was it felt to me, to put it very simply, to the child in me, like I felt like there was a good guy. I felt like he's one of the good guys. Like that is the leader that we've been longing for that I haven't seen anywhere, and I certainly didn't expect to see in Donald Trump. So there's still a part of me that's more of an intellectualizer part that might look at it and say, I think there is a world in which he could have such a thick and severe level of psychopathology that even in that moment he took it as an opportunity to advance politically. I think it's possible. But the more kind of like I said, visceral response, we use that word often like negatively. My more visceral response was like, that was awesome. Like I felt like that was awesome. And I think I'm certainly not alone in that. What you've seen over the last 48 hours is a lot of people supporting him for the first time after witnessing that.
Yeah, because it's the moment of death. It's the moment where you're like facing down your own end.
Sure.
That is are closest to clarity and our true self. Which is why I think it's like now it clears up. This is what I think, like that narrative, the narrative of his psychopathology, the narrative of his using everything, like he's in it for himself. He only serves himself. That's like literally the CNN, ABC agenda. Like that's what they spin. That's what they want people to think. And anybody who thinks that, it's not because you like did a psychological assessment on Trump. It's because this is all we hear all day, all the
Well,
time.
not entirely. You're a psychologist. I mean, your perspective on Trump, you just can literally see him speaking, and sometimes the defenses ooze out of him. It's not just because you're influenced by a left spin, right?
I'm not saying he doesn't have defenses. I'm saying I don't think he's only out to serve himself. I think that he is, to his core, a true, thoroughly integrated American patriot. I think he loves our country, and I think he
Yeah.
wants to literally lay down his life to serve our country.
I'm seeing that as possible for the first time as a result of this weekend.
And
I never believed that to be possible before seeing this.
Yeah, I just think that that's part of, and I'm not like a super MAGA, like I'm not like all this stuff. Like I'm just saying like that's what I see when I see. That's why I've liked him from 2016.
Yeah.
Like I've seen that consistently, clearly through, and I think that the country, the world can now see it very clearly. Like it's like this moment surfaced the truth of who he really is.
Well, this is what we long for, right? I mean, if we're built for that perfect eternal communion with God, we sometimes project that and look for that in people in authority over us and for our leaders. That's why the last, I don't know, for me, 20 years have been so disappointing, whether it's in the church and the scandals in the church, or learning more of the truth about our political leaders or celebrities as like technology is advanced, we're able to peer into people's lives in a new way. There's such a disillusionment and disappointment with our leaders. We haven't had a heroic leader in so long. That's why people are so hurt by Trump if they perceive him as, villainous. But this, like, it does, if he's able to participate in God's self-sacrificial love, altruistic love, to the point as what you're describing, to the point of he's willing to die for it, then that creates a space for hope in our hearts.
Yes,
And
exactly.
that's new for me, interiorly, myself.
And I mean, call it a pitch, call it a spin, whatever. But like he and Melania now are showing up in more clarity, and everything is about unity. We have to unite America. We have to like rise above this. And it's like everybody else, all the Democratic politicians, like
Yeah.
when they say that, it's like this little bit of lip service that they're giving. Like, we have to get past this. We can't have violence, whatever. But
Turn down
I
the
was thinking,
temperature.
I was thinking about this. If Biden was really like integrated and a real American hero, like, can you imagine? This was his moment to shine. Like, he could have completely turned around the election after the assassination attempt. Like, he
In
could
his
have won the
response, yeah.
election.
In his response, yeah.
If Biden got up there and in tears and anger, like slammed his fist down and said, "Enough is enough. We cannot have this. This is not what our country is about." If he actually showed up as a leader
Right.
and like had an impassioned plea, like there's something in this man that gives a crap about our country. And he's like, this cannot be what America is, and this cannot be what we're known for around the world. And we're better than this, and we've already shed so much blood to earn the right to be American. And this cannot be where we are in 2024. Like, he could have had a 10-minute speech that won him the election.
I don't even think he has the motive for it. He was just kind of like stumbling through, and he had a commentary he offered. I mean, he was using the wrong vocabulary. He was saying,
He doesn't have he doesn't have the heart. He's not integrated. He's not a real. That's the opposite of what I'm saying I see in Trump, where it's like give him the moment and he's gonna rise to the occasion because it's actually in him.
Yeah.
Give Biden the moment and he's not gonna rise to the occasion because it's actually not in him.
Yeah, very, very true. I mean, And it doesn't help that he's using his words are failing him, and he's using the wrong vocabulary, and he's talking about how this election should be won at the, what he said, not by bullets, but at the boxes. The I don't know what he said, but
ballots, not bullets.
Yeah, but no, but he said there's some way he phrased it, which was just a deviant verbalization, which we almost named our last show. Another deviant verbalization from President Biden. But yeah,
and it's only providential that his cognitive decline is happening so radically right now. It's like, it's the same guy that's been there the whole time. It's been the same puppet, the same like weak, un-American, non-patriot that has been leading our country for the last 3.5 years. It's why we're in such dire straits economically, financially, and internationally. Like, we are a laughing stock. Like, none of this, like all this nonsense from the debate, like, oh, Putin wouldn't dare right now. We put him in his place. Like, that's the most absurd, delusional thought that I've ever heard. I couldn't believe he even said it. I was like, avoid the topic. That's your best option here. But instead, he went delusional.
He's not impressive. No one. He's a shell of a man. Now versus Trump, who was shot. He was literally shot, and was able to get up in that moment, get his shoes. He had to get his shoes. Let me get my shoes first. And then they were ushering him off, and he's like, no, wait. And then just the fight. There was a real leadership quality to it. There's real heroism to it. That was an impressive image. Those pictures, my goodness. I don't know what the award is for, like the equivalent to like the Pulitzer Prize, like for photos and imagery, but whatever it is, everyone saw those right away. They're like, wow, that's going to the history books. Like, that defines a political era. It was amazing. All we needed was a bald eagle flying through. We had a bald eagle. It was the perfect image, right?
The other thing, so another piece of this is Melania Trump, who's Catholic, and I don't really remember much of what she did or said when she was first lady, but she wrote, this letter that she wrote, this response letter from Melania, was so beautiful, and it was like, this is so Catholic, and it felt like reading something, parts of it anyway, that like John Paul II would have written. And I was thinking, like, the hope here, like that this is a clarifying moment, not just in the country, not just for the world, but for the Trumps, where all of the divisiveness and the ways that his actual personality problems and patterns have created division. It's like, maybe this is Trump's wake-up call. Maybe this is his conversion. And then Melania,
maybe, very much possible.
And Melania's there, and she's like, now she's coming out writing this stuff, and it's like, man, imagine if we had a Catholic first lady who actually showed up, and then she like called us to something better. I want to read some parts of her.
I got it here. A monster who recognized my husband as an inhuman political machine attempted to wring out Donald's passion, his laughter, his ingenuity, love of music, inspiration. The core facets of my husband's life, his human side, were buried below the political machine. Donald, the generous and caring man who I have been with through the best and worst of times. I mean, the humanization of Trump.
Like, let's not forget he's a person.
Yes, the clarion.
And then she says, let us not forget that differing opinions, policy, political games are inferior to love. Our personal, structural, and life commitment until death is at serious risk. Political concepts are simple when compared to us, human beings. We are all humans, and fundamentally, instinctively, we want to help one another. American politics are only one vehicle that can uplift our communities. This is like John Paul II. Love, compassion, kindness, and empathy are necessities.
Yeah, and I think what this does to me is it gives rise to the true battle. I mean, he was saying fight, 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 and some can interpret that as like a political statement or a political gesture, fight the Democrats, so to speak. But I think, when you have people on the left who are like sort of double, I mean, it's just a bit like atrocious. Some of the responses from some people on the left. You had that staffer that was fired from New York who was just talking about, like, it's like the don't miss, the hashtag don't miss next time you had one job to do. who are like still seeing him in very inhuman form that are saying like, oh, he should have been shot, right? Like, it's too bad that he wasn't shot. There's like that basic sentiment, which is so terrible. But then you have, and that's not, I don't want to mischaracterize all of the left. I mean, one of the beautiful things here, which reflects the true battle, is how many people are saying prayers up for President Trump. This is terrible. People on the left and right. Like, I think we were really unified as a nation in prayers. Some of that might be baloney, right? Some of that might be like, this is what I have to say in terms of a public statement. But I think it really was a wake-up call in terms of bringing people to the right side of the real battle, which is a spiritual battle.
I think a lot of it's baloney because I mean, you know, the phrase that bless your heart or bless his heart, bless her heart, like the Southern
Yeah.
passive aggressive. I literally see people like, because then the new form of it is thoughts and prayers.
Right.
So
Yeah.
people are writing bless his heart and thoughts and prayers. Like, there's so much of this, but I think it's a true patriotism, and Trump really actually believes that our country is in danger, and that he's fulfilling a purpose to protect our country, to save our country.
Yeah, and what it's in danger of is an ideology like this. There's this political commentary, if people have heard of him, Destiny. He's on the left. This is his quote on Twitter after the shooting. I've stressed many times on my stream before, having a firearm means absolutely nothing if you don't spend the time at the range practicing with it. I mean, where is your humanity? That is what a terrible
It's crazy.
thing to say. Like, it's outrageous. I can't believe people aren't like to still see him as some kind of political figure and not see Trump's humanity. There's blood streaming down his ear. To think about his wife, to think about not even if you don't like Trump. I mean, a man died. Like, this is awful. Just I can't believe some of the responses that I've seen from people. It's absolutely terrible.
Yeah, it's totally nonsensical. But I do think, I mean, it's very clear. It's very clear how agenda driven the media is, and people's opinions are of of reality based on agenda driven media. So it's like, you know, all the people that were like pro Palestine, they're like chanting from the river to the sea, from the river to the sea, and then the reporters go in asking these college kids like, which river and to what sea?
Right?
Do you even know what you're chanting? And nobody knows what they're even chanting. And they're like, okay, so you want to support Hamas and these people where, especially the best is when they go find the like overtly, explicitly, visibly, gender confused people, and then they're like, oh, you're pro Palestine, huh? You know that you would be shot in Palestine, you would be killed, you would not be allowed to live. And they're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh yeah, no, this is what you're supporting. This is what you're picketing and what you're protesting for, is like this whole culture that would actually want you dead.
Right. Yeah.
It's in Israel you would be allowed to live.
Yeah.
So people don't get what they are. They're just being fed a story and they believe it. And now they're becoming impassioned because this is the Catholic take on this. This is because God is missing from our culture.
Oh yeah.
So the human heart, which is made to worship, the human being, the person who's made to get on our knees and to be committed and loyal, we are made for this sonship, and we have no father to be the son of. We have no parent, we have no God to commit ourselves to and to be loyal to and committed to. So these agendas are presented and these ideologies are presented, and it's like these things are worth dying for.
Right. Yes. Political ideology has raised the level of religion, which we lack now.
Right. But there's no substance to it, and people are not actually willing to give up their life for it. And so then when you see somebody who's about to give their life up for something, when you have a visible depiction of a kind of martyrdom, then it shakes you to the core. And you're like, do you believe in your ideology as much as this man does? Are you going to literally take a bullet to the head?
Right. Right. Do you believe it to that extent?
Not theoretically take it, because everyone's like, I'll take a bullet to the head. It's like, okay. But now look at what that looks like. Here's real blood. Here's real millimeters from actual death. Like, your life is over. Your platform's done. You have no more opinion. You have nothing else to say. You have no voice. You don't get to be in a safe space anymore. You're dead.
Yeah. I think a part of me on that last point, there's a part of me that like even struggles to internalize that it actually happened, like the realism of the event, like an actual bullet. I mean, that scene is something that happens in film, right? And these shootouts, and it's like someone gets shot, and it's like, "Oh, are you okay?" Yeah, it just grazed me, and you see like the bullet like split their clothing, and you just see like a little cut. It like went right through my ear, like it didn't kill. It's like that really happened. Someone was shooting for his head. Yeah, of course. And then there's the. I mean, I'm curious about what you think about this because I have a dear friend that said let's not compare Trump to JP2, but within the Catholic world, there is this idea that like just like with JP2 at Fatima, Our Lady moved the bullet a centimeter so it wouldn't kill him. Trump's head moved at the last moment. He was a centimeter away, and this idea that like prayers is what saved Trump's life, and like this is divine intervention of why he didn't die because that last split second of him moving his head. Do you believe that there was divine intervention involved here to keep him alive?
Well, I do, but I think it's less sensational than people make it out because people don't realize how much divine intervention and providence is part of our normal life.
Yeah,
Like God's will, God's providence is enveloping everything, and it's not like, oh, this one moment is so miraculous, and it's because Trump is the anointed one, and he's whatever. Like, no, it's not that at all. But it also is true that I mean, it very easily could have been the end of his life, you know. And
yeah,
and I think JP2's quote on this, I love his quote. He's like, one person shot the gun, and another person guided the bullet, and it's
yeah, yeah.
like that could apply to this situation, sure. Like I think every situation in some way. But then people are like, well, what about then the people that are actually killed? Like God wants that to happen too, and that brings up a whole mystery of
Suffering.
suffering and evil and everything
Yeah,
else.
yeah. It's true that God, like divine intervention isn't something that happens rarely. It is absolutely constant. What is rare is God reveals to us when He is intervening. That's the rare thing. When He shows how
Mm.
He has made His presence known and how He has affected us. Most of the time, it's just hidden. But we take on faith that there's constant divine intervention. That's what's happening. You have a nice thought. It's probably your guardian angel whispering something, virtuous into your ear.
Yeah, or the bad thoughts from the evil spirits. Like that's happening
Yeah, yeah,
all day long,
yeah,
nonstop. It's constantly.
yeah. Spiritual warfare is constant. Any thoughts on the conspiracy theories around requests to get more Secret Service for Trump the last few months that were denied by Democrats, and then we have
Yeah, listen, I
now.
don't. I really. I mean, look, I don't want to just do like commentary on news cycles. Like, what I think we need to realize from that is, like, let's say it's true. There's some conspiracy, but like,
Sure.
we cannot put our hope in the government. We can't put our hope in things of this world. Like at the
No.
end of the day, even if Trump is elected president, God willing, I hope. Certainly hope he is. Like, can you imagine that the fallout? Gosh, if I mean, 2020, if that was like a questionable stolen election, this would be like a
Oh,
whole nother level. Like
yes.
26 is nothing compared to what will
I
happen.
mean, if Biden wins this time, I mean, I think that we're actually probably at risk of civil war if that, if that happens. People will be out of their minds upset about that.
So we have to put our hope in the next world, not this one. And I think this is also listen to what else came from Melania. I love this. Let us remember that when the time comes to look beyond the left and the right, beyond the red and the blue, we all come from families with the passion to fight for a better life together while we are here in this earthly realm. So
Right.
she's already calling us to this reality like this is just for now. Like let's do our best, let's figure this out. Like let's try to do what we can here, but we have to keep in mind like this is a temporary realm that
Yeah,
we
and
are living in.
and she's calling us to lift our eyes beyond the other rhetoric, which is let's turn the temperature down on the political rhetoric. It's like, what does that mean? Just be a little less contentious? Like we
Right.
could still be mad at each other and still fight, but not if it means violence. Like that's not the answer. She's saying, no, look at humanity and look at what is important beyond that. Look at the good of Democrats and their humanity and what they're pursuing and what they believe to be good. I mean, like, there's like a real opportunity for unification here, which, to your point, is something that Biden could have communicated in his
Right.
speech. And like, actually, Melania is doing the job that Biden should have been doing.
Exactly. Exactly. Because they both had an opportunity, both sides had an opportunity to double down on humanity, on the good of the human. And only one side actually is clearly understanding. Well, I won't say this so polemically, but one side is like far more in touch with the good and dignity of the human person than the other. And so it just comes clear. Like when death is on the line, never battle the wits of it with a Sicilian when death is on the line. But when death is on the line, like the true natures come to the surface, and we see clearly what's really going on here. And I think that's the moment we're in right now. I think here's another thing. Here's another point of reflection I've had, and tell me what you think about this. But I saw, somebody else had written like, we are a country where we decide things by ballots, not bullets. And
Yes.
I was thinking about this a lot because, this idea of, there's a lot of ideas in this, like patriotism, the good of sacrificing your life for your country. Like that's actually a virtue. Like in Catholic theology, that's a virtue. And, and then we have the examples of the saints like St. Thomas More, who was faithful to his king, only next to Jesus Christ. But his loyalty, his patriotism, his ability, his desire to lay down his life, like he was there for his king, for his country.
Mm-hmm.
And, second to Jesus, obviously. But the fact is, like, the second place is to your king, like the second of your life. Like your patriotism and your allegiance is to your country. Well, we are a country founded on bullets.
Mm-hmm.
We are founded on bullets. We're not founded on ballots. We are founded on the bullets from revolution and a tremendous amount of death and bloodshed and suffering for fighting for virtues and values that people held dear, and for all sorts of reasons. But that's the common denominator, is like, I'm willing to give my life for this country. Like not giving my life for my faith, giving my life for this country, which is virtuous. And then, so I've been thinking about our country and what it means to be American, and how, like, okay, are we ballots or bullets? And it's like, well, we should be ballots because we should all be fighting for peace.
Right.
But then we have the Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, so like a lot of things in the first 100 years could be decided by ballot. And then we have the Civil War, which is like, yeah, that's not getting decided by ballot. And now we have to return to bullets.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and then that's resolved. And then we have, the next 100 years or whatever. And it's like, okay, so then we had things like prohibition, like really, really serious division in our country. And things were decided by ballots, and so
By bullets,
unless you're talking about like, no, I'm saying is like, unless you're like Al Capone,
right?
Prohibition started and ended without a war. It started and ended by votes,
right?
And then we get into like all the rest of the stuff of the 20th century. But essentially, we went from the Civil War till now, without bullets to decide the way that the country is going. So it's like, I don't know, I've just been reflecting on it. It's like, this is a pretty significant moment, not just because of an attempted assassination, but it's and I don't remember anything. I don't know much about when the attempted assassination on Reagan happened.
81.
But it feels like, I don't know that the country was as divided in 81, and that the assassination attempt on Reagan was almost anticipated. You heard like Tucker Carlson laying out how, like, we expect Trump to be assassinated. Like,
yes,
that was what was being said by multiple places. And now that it happened, nobody's going, I'm so shocked it happened. It's surreal.
It was not shocking at all that he was shot. It's surreal
like I had the same experience of like, this is weird that this even happened. Like it's
Yeah.
still surreal, but it's not shocking because
Yeah.
it's a manifestation of the actual division in our country. And the division in our country has escalated to the point of bullets. And so I think that's when Melania is saying what she's saying, and even the Democrats who are begrudgingly saying we have to turn down the temperature, like we're actually at a point, and I'm not saying this to be inflammatory or even conspiracy theory and not fear mongering at all, but literally we're at a point of bullets now. So like where is that going to escalate? It could.
Yeah. Yeah. One thought that came to my mind as you were talking was I think you're actually missing out on a lot of American history that was also resolved by bullets. I mean, I think the Vietnam War and protests around the Vietnam War and the violence there actually did. It wasn't voted upon, but it probably influenced what was happening in Washington. There's been all kinds of violence all the way through. I do, of course. I mean, have to be really careful to make clear that you're not advocating for any kind of violence. It's not a good thing that our country was founded on bullets. I mean, the idea is that at points it has been necessary so that peace could be established
Oh,
and
this is my
sustained.
point. When I say
Yeah.
bullets, I don't mean that we should call to arms and we're going to go out there shooting people. I'm saying we might have to
Right.
take a bullet for what we believe in.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully this was the bullet, all the bullets that were necessary, right? Like hopefully this was the end, which is becomes the catalyst for change. And like I guess what you're saying is like we have to recognize that this has been a part of our history. This is a current moment and maybe it needs to escalate to this level before people take things seriously.
And also the fact is that human nature is broken and sinful and corrupt. And
Hmm.
so we have to recognize the fact that sometimes we have to be ready to die. That's my point. We have to be ready to die.
Yeah.
It's a virtue to believe in something that's bigger than us, and it's not to be disregarded just because it's the country. Like I think Americans, at least in my generation, I think, and probably in the younger generations, do not have an appreciation for patriotism because we've never had to like going to war, Vietnam, going to world wars. Like I'm not saying there's never been bullets. I'm saying that the country itself has not been divided, like potential civil war splintering or splintering off of England as our own entity, like
Hmm.
fighting for our own national identity or fighting for a national identity in the Civil War. And whether we are defending ourselves or promoting or, in the founding fathers breaking off, that's where we need to have some renewal of a sense of patriotism that says like it's actually virtuous to love and fight for something that's bigger than ourselves, even if it's
Yeah.
not just the church.
Yes. Well, it has to be in line with the church, right? It has to be it has to line up with what we believe to be true, good, and beautiful in terms of what
Of
God reveals
course.
to us. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And yes, second to Jesus, the king second to Jesus. But that's also why the country had to that's why we had the revolution. The American
Yeah.
Revolution was like we believe that our country is going to be more in line with God's principles than
Yeah.
what is being done through from England.
Yeah.
So and Paula, not saying anything about that there weren't bullets during Vietnam, protests and things like that. And to your point, and I think Dr. Bryan was making the point. There are ways to look at it. Like bullets were involved in that movement,
Yeah.
but the literal, actual civil war didn't happen during the '60s. Like you could say there was a cultural civil war, or okay, like yes, an argument could be made.
Sure.
But is it like every American thinking about, a call to arms or a call to like, am I ready to give my blood for for my country?
Yeah. Hannah says here, I feel like bad behavior, quote, bad behavior has been condoned recently and allowed without a counter check, allowing it to hype up to our current level of tension. So balance went out the window and people act out. Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, a lot of people are quoting some things that Biden said a week ago about after this debate we need to put Trump in a bullseye. I mean, I would like to give President Biden the benefit of the doubt that he didn't mean that literally. but the language surrounding Trump for political reasons, he equating him to Hitler. I mean, like, it's not surprising that it's led to like this, like the language used actually like violent language has been used, or violent implications of the language
Yeah, I
used.
mean, putting him in a bullseye is the most innocuous. It's like the I mean, people were literally saying they would, take him out, like,
Right.
violence, like literal violence, and it's disturbing,
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
allowed. It's not checked. It's like, okay, but I just want to come back around to this idea that Trump is, I think, in my opinion, thoroughly a patriot, thoroughly integral in his love for and desire to protect our country. And that's why I think that also makes sense of why, and also narcissistic. Like, I'm not saying that's not part of it also, but it's why he's so, he's so fickle with people he hires, because he believes thoroughly that his agenda is what's good for our country. And even if you have a Republican
He,
or a cabinet
he
member,
he narcissistically believes that his agenda is the best thing for our country.
yeah, fine, fine.
Yeah.
But it's a narcissistic love for our country.
Mhm.
Like, that falls apart if you really are looking at it psychologically. There's a difference between a narcissist who's like thoroughly invested in protecting the brand of himself
Mhm.
versus a person who's truly a patriot and a loyal, loyal patriot to our country, who has narcissistic patterns that are serving his desire to save our country.
Right. But yes, you could see how people could experience that as it's wrapped in narcissism, and and not make too far of a leap saying that it's Hitler like. Like, Hitler was also a patriot according to Hitler in terms of what he believed was best for the world.
I agree. I think that's true. But I don't exactly. I totally agree with that. And I think that Hitler was very integrated in that sense.
Hmm.
He was, and I don't know, I never did like a deep dive on Hitler's biography, but
Yeah.
just from the surface, that's what I would say.
But what he believed as like what the state is and what the state should be was obviously very problematic. We have to hope
Exactly.
that Trump's idea of what it means to be the United States is
I,
in line
I'm
with our
I'm
values.
yes,
But
100%. But there's a significant major Democratic run media spun agenda to say that Trump is only selfish. And I'm
yeah,
just dismantling that narrative. Because when you
sure.
have a man stand up and take a bullet and fist pump and say fight, and he's fighting for America, for the United States of America, with the flag behind him, it's like,
Mhm.
this guy means what he says. He's not in it for himself. It's a bunch of
Yeah.
BS media spun leftist agenda.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder the theme of "Make America Great Again." I wonder what that means for him psychologically. Like, he remembers a time when America was great for him in his life, in his childhood, in his family experience, and so what he wants to return to is something that he believes in as an ideal, in which his life was wonderful, right? And like on a personal level, and then by extension, the world around him for other people that were in his proximity, right? And that's what he's hoping to return to. And as he's grown older and he's seen what the country has morphed into, it's gotten away from what he believes was a better America. That's why it's make America great again. Make it America great again.
Sure. Yeah, it makes sense. And Paul asks a good question. Do you see Trump as being for the poor? And I would say, in Trump's way, in Trump's mind, he's for the poor. I mean, and he would say he's for building a country that gives people opportunity to come out of their poverty, and for people to like have better life and health and pursuit of happiness, which is the principles that our country is founded on, because of the structures that the government's responsible for stewarding. And if he does his job to steward his responsibility through limited government, then the poor have the best possible outcomes. It's not his job to change their life. It's not his job to choose good things for the poor, but it's his job as president to create a structure that's his stewardship of his role. And he
Economic
believes that's what
structures.
he's doing. And then if you
Yeah.
look at like, okay, so then it's like, okay, so to your point too, it's like, okay, how is he not Hitler? Of course, we have to see that,
She takes
you
them.
know,
Yeah.
the
Because
principles
it.
line up,
Yeah.
how the principles line up. And you say, well, what about his stance on immigration? What about his stance on, open borders or sending people back, whatever? It's like, yeah, look at how much crime, how much pain and suffering have the poor endured because of the current policies. And what he wants to do actually lines up with better outcomes when you create a frame and structure that, I mean, this is what we do all day in psychology. Like we create frames and structures that may be challenging for people at times when they have to hit the wall. And he wanted to build a wall, but it's like it's hard when you hit a wall. But why do we build walls? It's because we know that it's for human flourishing, that we need to know where the boundaries and limits are.
Mhm.
And when you remove all the boundaries and walls, then you actually hurt people, and
Create
it creates
chaos
disservice and
and
chaos.
unpredictability and a lack of context that you can rely on and
Exactly.
you can trust. Yeah, that happens at an individual level. And so, I mean, even when we were talking about his immigration stuff not very long ago, um, when you think about it, like on like if you were to look at an analog in the life of an individual, you cannot help other people unless you have your house in order. You need to have your boundaries and your like everything set up for you. And if someone else's needs are taking away from your what is good for you, then you have to put that wall up. You have to put that boundary up. And then we were talking about the compassion and sympathy necessary for people that want to come over the border and emigrate here. But even the Holy Father said, like, yeah, but if it's draining your country and hurting your people, like then what is good for your people does have to take precedence. Like you can't give what you don't have. You have to create a space for stability within a nation. Without boundaries, there's no stability within a nation, and then do what you can to take care of the poor or the immigrant or whomever else.
Well, and this is also just a very deeply political ideology divide. And, I've seen a couple of people commenting here. Agnes says Republican policies benefit the rich, not the poor. I mean, that's a really dramatic statement. But I always think about these things when it comes to these really sort of conflictual conversations. It's like, what's the underlying principle that we need to really be looking at here? Like in the pro-life, pro-choice debate, it's too easy to be like, you're a baby murderer, or you don't care about women, and that's like where the debate stays on the surface. It's like, well, there's another conversation that needs to happen here, which is less, it's a less contentious in its own conversation, which is the philosophy of the human person. Like, let's realize, number one, this is a philosophical debate, and it has to do with, when does a person exist? Now, we're not talking about murdering, and we're not talking about misogyny. We're talking about the philosophy of the human person. Where and when does a person exist? And if we could get to a place where we could dialogue at that level, you realize, like, oh, that's a good question. Like, if you have a position that life starts at conception, a human person exists at conception, that's a solid position. Obviously, it's the one that we have, but that's where we have to provide evidence. We have to
Everything
talk
flows from
about
there.
it.
Everything flows
Everything
from there.
flows from there. So here's the thing, to Agnes and other people who see this like divide on the surface level. It's really a question about the role of government. It's not about, like, is the Republican policy better than the Democratic policy, and who's making the better policy to serve which demographic of a socioeconomic status. It's like, all right, it's kind of like big government versus little government divide. And that's the conversation. It's like, what is the president of the United States actually the steward of? What is he supposed to do? It's like, if you're talking about the wall, and then it's like, oh, he lacks so much compassion for the families. It's like, it's not his role. He's not the nurses and the border patrol and the social workers on the front lines dealing with the actual families.
No.
Like, if I was the director of social work, if Trump was running for being the director of social work for the agency that takes care of the families at the border, you should know that the person in that position has very deep compassion, and you see it and you hear it and you know it, that that role, that is a steward where compassion for these families should be the hallmark. Now, I'm not saying people shouldn't have compassion, and I'm not saying Trump doesn't need conversion, which is why I'm hoping that this event actually changes how he talks about stuff. What I am saying, though, is you're approaching a very high level, abstract, top down role and stewardship of a decision that needs to be made. Do we have a wall? Do we have clear policies that are upheld, that the law of the land is respected at the border? That's not a conversation that's either for or against compassion for people. The stewardship of that policy and that position is, we need to have respected law of the land. And if you really want to trickle that down to the deepest, to the most personal level, it's like, well, when the law is not respected, we have criminals running rampant. We have California criminals murdering people, looting stores, like all this stuff's happening. Who's taking care of those people? What about those poor people? Where's the compassion for all the victims of the crime that come from a culture where the law is not respected? So maybe the man setting the law at the top doesn't sound compassionate, but his decision and policy actually creates a framework that allows for more compassion, is actually more compassionate for the individual at the bottom of the hierarchy of subsidiarity. Does that make sense?
It does. I feel, again, I feel a little bit torn on this topic, because I generally agree with the framework that you're putting out there in terms of like the role of government and creating a structure in which it allows for people to thrive. That said, like, to Agnes's point, I mean, I certainly, there are people that take advantage of government aid and government handouts, whether it's people on Social Security or whatever. And but I also know people in my personal life that could not exist outside of the financial support of the government, mentally ill, or someone who's struggling financially. And so like, I think there is a line that's actually hard to like delineate in terms of the amount of aid and support that the government can give, can and should give financially. I don't think it should be full stop. Like, the government should be so small that it doesn't help people out. Like,
I
there
didn't
has to
say
be.
that. I'm not saying that.
I know. I'm just creating. But you're going to be like, what you're saying could be positioned as such. Not that you're saying it, but like, this is the blending, and this is the beauty.
That's just what the left. That's how the left would position what I'm saying. That's taking what I'm saying out of context. What I'm saying is, there are concerns that are very clear from the top that need to be accounted for and stewarded, and then that allows for all the other possibilities underneath it. So if we were positive instead of in deficit as a country, and that's like, out of the surplus, because we're running our country well, here's more that we can do to help people. Or, I mean, Agnes says he wanted to end Meals on Wheels. Like, that's such a divisive statement. If Meals on Wheels was a privately run company and it was a nonprofit that somebody started out of their ingenuity because they have the freedom from being an American, and we have a booming positive economy like we did in the 80s under Reagan, and then they were like, this is how I want to give back. I don't think Trump is going to come in and say, we should shut this down. I don't think Republicans are going to say, we want to shut this down. So he didn't want to end Meals on Wheels. Like, that's out of context. Maybe the disbursement of funding is not proper or stewarded well in its current state, based on our actual current situation, that should be prioritized. And at the end of the day, prioritizing those levels of support for people is actually hurting the running of government. And if that's the case, and I'm not an expert on this, I'm not saying that's the case. I'm saying, if that's the case, I hope to God that the person who's in charge of stewarding those federal decisions can see that and doesn't let that happen.
Yeah. And this is the hard thing about, that's why it's like one of the hardest positions in the world. It's that you're making these decisions for however many people there are in the United States, and one way or the other, someone is going to suffer. Someone's going to suffer based on the decisions that you're making. So even if it's reprioritizing what is best to stabilize the economic structures of our country, there is, you know, Joe Schmo over here who now has his Meals on Wheels taken away, and he's not eating now, and he has to figure out some kind of new way to get his food. So,
Yeah. And I'm
yeah,
not saying that's not that's terrible.
from
I'm not saying that's not terrible. I'm just
right,
saying,
from the bottom up, it's like where are you starting? And you're looking at the presidential position from the top down, making these decisions that's going to affect a lot of people, or are we emphasizing the individual and all of the individuals and trying and like making decisions best on like making decisions for what we believe is best for a given person or a given small group, even if that means harming other small groups.
yeah, exactly.
Hannah asks, how do we heal? How does America go forward from this? It's a great question.
3 minutes. 3 minutes to wrap it up here, folks. We're going to answer all your questions.
Yeah, America heals first and foremost through prayer. We all heal through prayer. I mean, having a spirit of conversion through which we grow in our capacity to love, which is going to alter the way we're looking at even those that we disagree with. Like that is first and foremost the next step, I think. And that's why I was grateful if these kind of if this messaging was authentic, I was grateful for how many people came together and were praying in this frightening moment for many. Um, that'd be my first step. What else do you think?
Yeah, prayer is number one, and then I'll end with another quote from Melania's letter. She said this morning, "Ascend above the hate, the vitriol, and the simple-minded ideas that ignite violence. We all want a world where respect is paramount, family is first, and love transcends. We can realize this world again. Each of us must demand it to get it back. We must insist that respect fills the cornerstone of our relationships again." And I just think like again, so many of these agendas are just love is love is actually an anti-love agenda. And all this trans stuff is not family first. It's individual first.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the opposite. That's the distortion of the dignity of the human person. That's how we warp and distort something really good and beautiful. The human person, the dignity of the human person, and as Pope Francis says, is infinite. And the distortion of that is individualism. And it's where the subjectivity of the person is the most profound mark of our dignity, but subjectivism is a distortion of that, where the only thing that matters is what you think and feel. Your truth is your truth.
Right. We have to align our subjective experience with what is objectively true. Meet people where they are, validate the way they're looking at the world, which is never going to be 100% clear. It's never
Right.
going to
And
be.
the first place that happens is in the family. The
Right.
first place that happens is in marriage, where it's like, oh, just like hooking up and then separating is not the option. Marriage is till death do you part. So you're gonna have to figure out how to deal with this other human. Like, how do you not be the only uh the only anchor point and the only litmus and the only sort of thing that's important to you in your life? And then because of this being with another person, then now you have children. And guess what you're doing by having children? And guess what you're teaching children by bringing children into a family? And guess what siblings have to figure out really
Yeah.
quickly in the
Yeah.
beginning of their life is like, I'm
Yeah.
not the center of the universe.
Yeah. And this is step two. Step one is prayer because you need the grace in order to live in such a way that you're sacrificing yourself for other people. You can't just do that
Yes.
in the abstract. So it's that prayer that leads into living a life of Christ.
Hmm.
And it's easiest to do in your home. Well, sometimes it's very hard to do in your home, but the emotional attachment that you have to people in your immediate family and in your social life, like that's where you got to begin. was it Mother Teresa that said, you want to change the United States, go home and love your family? I mean,
Yes. This is it. Like, that's what I just love this letter from Melania. I can't wait for her to show up. I'm going to be praying for her nonstop.
yeah,
Like, I mean, as much as obviously got to pray for Trump, for Donald Trump, but it's going to be so beautiful if this. And again, to clarify anything else I said today, like, Trump needs conversion. Like, Trump needs a lot of conversion.
yeah,
And Trump needs to clarify and clean up the way he talks, and he's got to be less divisive. Like, so much of his personality is bombastic, and so much of it is, sensational, and that narcissistic patterns are clear. But I believe in the core that he's the patriot who actually loves our country, that I'm going to be voting for. And Melania, I think, is a channel of grace, that she's a hope that even real Catholic grace, full sacramental grace, who knows what can happen. But I'm going to be praying for her
definitely.
to do more of what she did in this letter.
Yeah, it was really impressive. It was. And praying for that. This is the end of the violence, that this was the catalyst we needed to kind of like set ourselves on the right path as a nation.
Amen.
So thanks, everybody. God bless you. We'll do Wednesday mailbag. So keep those questions coming in. Mailbag at CatholicPsych.com, unless something else insane happens in the next 2 days, which you can never count out as a possibility. We would actually prefer that things settle down a little bit and we can answer some of your questions.
Amen.
Thanks, everyone.